Mike and Wally, please introduce yourselves and then feel free to start sharing your presentation whenever you're ready. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Lisa. My name is Wally DeYoung. Mike, if it's okay, I'll start since I think I'm first in the batting lineup here between the two of us. I'm the outreach chairman for Mount Diablo Interpretive Association. I'm also a UC naturalist and a natural history docent for Mount Diablo State Park. I'm a member of the peregrine falcon team, one of my passions on the mountain. And I'm also a co-producer for the Wild Mount Diablo series, which we'll touch on briefly here in a moment. Okay, everybody see that okay, I assume?
Yep, good.
We really appreciate the opportunity both Mike and I do to tell you a bit about Mount Diablo and about the Mount Diablo Interpretive Association. That's kind of a mouthful, so we use the acronym MDIA, which I'll probably use a lot this morning. We'll also touch on some opportunities for people to become involved should they choose to, which is a big part of what we do in MDIA. And you really can't tell the story of MDIA without at least briefly touching on Mount Diablo itself. A lot of people think Mount Diablo is or was a volcano. Not true, but its origins are volcanic. So about 165 million years ago, literally the Jurassic period, volcanic rock lay on the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And about 4 million years ago, the tectonic plates pushed the Pacific up over the top of the continental and created the mountain as we know it today. Native Americans, very proud of all of you for recognizing them at the offset of your meeting. They've lived around the mountain. Some people say 5,000 years. They will say since the beginning of time. And for them, it certainly was. And of course, the Ohlone and the Miwok are those that we associate most closely with the mountain. They consider it a sacred place, they still do today. The Ohlone call the mountain Tushtak, place of the day. I love how that rolls out of your mouth, Tushtak. So in the late 1800s, there was a luxury 16-room hotel called Mountain House, which you may be familiar with, was built near the summit, and wealthy visitors, including John Muir, would take a stagecoach up from Martinez to visit and get a taste of the wilderness. And it was actually burnt down in the early 1900s by local ranchers who didn't appreciate city folks traipsing through their fields. True story. Then in 1915, toll roads were built to the top of the summit. 1921, the state park and game refuge, as it was called back then, was created. So we just had our 100-year anniversary for the state park last year. Oh, and apparently back then it was a favorite site for moonshiners on the mountain. Some of you may be familiar with Jackass Canyon. Jackass used to be the term for moonshine back in the day. And so there are still the remnants of stills back there. So Mount Diablo's been home to ancient Indian cultures, Spanish explorers, Mexican soldiers, miners, moonshiners, and a century of ranchers. It's also home to an amazing assortment of wild creatures, from mountain lions, although we haven't seen any on the mountain in a few years at this point, which is a bit disturbing. But the largest population of golden eagles literally in the world exists there on Mount Diablo or the Diablo range around it. The peregrine falcon, the fastest creature on the planet, near and dear to my heart. Bears, including grizzly bears, they haven't inhabited the mountain since the 1940s, but they sure used to. There are great stories about Grizzly Adams hunting on the mountain long ago. And the mountain also boasts a huge diversity of plants, some that grow only there, such as the Mount Diablo globe lily, also known as the fairyland, and the Mount Diablo sunflower. And the view from its peak, oh my gosh, 3,849 feet, right? That's impressive to say the least. And on a clear day, you can see Yosemite from the summit of Mount Diablo and 40 of California's 58 counties. Talk about why it's important as the water source for so much of the watershed around it. Look at your own maps of Mount Diablo, which I'll be using thanks to the help of Tim Jensen giving us approval to use that, both the data in your overview document as well as some of the maps and whatnot to show people that very important fact. So what does Mount Diablo Interpretive Association do? Well, we were founded in 1974 with a motto of preservation through education by Sam Smoker. And Sam was the former executive director of the Lindsay Wildlife Museum. Some of you might know of him. I think today they prefer it being called the Lindsay Wildlife Experience, which it is. So MDIA is a nonprofit, all volunteer organization that assists the California Department of Parks and Recreation in maintaining and interpreting Mount Diablo State Park for its hundreds of thousands of visitors a year. So people ask, what's natural history interpretation? What do you mean by that? And there's a famous story about a young attorney by the name of Abraham Lincoln, who is making a point to his jury as a young lawyer in a pretty racy way. Look it up, it's really pretty funny. But the gist of his story is that you can get the facts right, but you can tell the story incorrectly. So in this context, interpretation is all about telling the story about what we see, and what we hear, and what we experience on Mount Diablo correctly. And we do this through education and sponsored activities, publications, all with a goal of fostering appreciation and an enlightened use of the park. We're very proud to provide the resources necessary to keep the museum and visitor center at the summit of the mountain open throughout the year. And we created and now manage the Mitchell Canyon Visitor Center, which is accessed near Clayton. I bet many of you have visited there, and it's a place where Mike does a lot of his work for the park. He's a true expert there, and we'll hear from him more about that in a minute. So our key roles in coordinating activities like Volunteer in the Park program, which is sponsored by the State Parks and Recreation. It trains and manages park docents, sponsors guided hikes, helps maintain trails, incredibly important. So all that said, I think you can see why our motto of preservation through education is a pretty good fit for MDIA. So during the pandemic, we have, of course, had to adjust how we accomplish our goals. And it's no surprise that we've learned to make use of Zoom for things even like virtual hikes. And we're now starting to move back towards offering in-person get-togethers on particular topics, which we've historically called mountain talks. But we also present regular webinars, which is one of the silver linings of what I think's come out of the ongoing pandemic. And these are incredibly engaging presentations that are led and moderated by our very own Vice President, Mike Brandy, who you will meet here in just a moment. So now that we're back to actually leading hikes and other in-person events, I'm sure we'll continue with these topical webinars on, topics like coyote behavior, pretty important a year or two ago if you lived around Lafayette and Moraga, right? Spiders of the mountain, October, the fall around Mount Diablo. If you've never come on a tarantula hike with us, I encourage you to do it. Lots of fun, especially bring the kids. Geology, wildflowers, peregrine falcons again, just to name a few. Our full library of webinars are available to anyone and everyone anytime you'd like at the MDIA website. We raise money in several ways, and every penny literally goes back into supporting Mount Diablo State Park. And as I mentioned before, we're a 100% volunteer organization. So annual dues for membership and donations, the sale of everything from snacks and water to maps and t-shirts, books, it all goes back to the park via MDIA's programs and projects. And sometimes the park will actually approach us directly and ask, have a request for funding for a specific project. And if the park can show us that it has a direct impact on education or increasing visitor experience, then we as the board have the ability to use those funds to help with such specific requests. So MDIA and the state park promote volunteerism within the park by offering, lots of different volunteer opportunities, as you can see here. Trainings provided along with identification in the form of, vests and hats, mostly so that visitors know who to ask questions of, and they do. And that's one of the best things about being an interpreter and a docent for the park. And some volunteers enjoy working at one of our 2 visitor centers, as I mentioned before. Others enjoy leading hikes or patrolling the backcountry on bikes. I'm an avid mountain biker. When I'm on duty, I'm on my mountain bike, loving it. Others are hiking, others are on horseback, all as docents for the park. Keeping the trails maintained, big important job. People really get into that, and it's so appreciated. And some folks focus directly on MDIA, either by serving on the board as a board member like Mike and I do, or by joining one of our many committees. So I mentioned my love of one team in particular, the Peregrine Falcon team. It's actually sponsored by MDIA at this point, which we're, very proud of. And we monitor and educate visitors about the fastest animal on the planet, the decline and return of this park's apex predator, the peregrine falcon. It's an amazing story. We also helped support a beautiful documentary about this very topic, which you can look up by Googling Return of the Pine Canyon Peregrine. Lovely, amazing story, truly. MDIA also provides visitors with key information about the park, right? It's pretty important. Help make their visit more enjoyable, informed. We either do that directly through our website or through our newsletters or the biannual Mount Diablo Review. We provide maps and weather and camping information, even history about the mountain, which a lot of people love, as I do. We also provide a lot of information about activities in the park, hiking, biking, horseback riding. With 162 miles of hiking trails and 20,000 acres, it really is a hiker and mountain bikers paradise. We also offer information on 38 suggested hikes. So you can kind of go on and say, feeling lazy today, I want to find this length, this difficulty, and there it is for you, ready for you to use either on your handheld device or print it out before you take off. So I mentioned bikes. Mount Diablo is known as a biker's park. And, if you've ever ridden to the summit, you know that people love riding to the summit in addition to mountain biking. But the regulations about biking are specific. And so we make them available on our website as well. And equestrians also obviously make use of the mountain. They can find information there too for themselves. Information is also available on the mountain's nature, whether that's plants or wildlife, geology, astronomy, native plants, peregrine falcon. And we post all that information and information on upcoming events to help visitors get the most out of their experience. That's really what we're all about. One of our most popular offerings are our nature guides, our bird identification guide. More than 200 species have been identified on Mount Diablo. Amazing. The butterfly information guide, identification guide, 70 species of butterflies are known to live on Mount Diablo. And last but not least, the wildflower identifier. So many folks just love coming up on the mountain and seeing how many they can find. Of the 350 wildflower species that have been identified on the mountain just last year. So MDIA is also very proud of our documentary tours, and we call them Audible Mount Diablo. They're produced by a very talented filmmaker by the name of Joan Hamilton, that I'm very proud to call my friend these days and coworker. They're a truly wonderful way to plan a trip or just enjoy on their own sake from the comfort of your home. I absolutely recommend them to you. Near and dear to my own heart and new to MDIA and the world is MDIA sponsors Wild Mount Diablo. It's a brand new series of mini documentaries on wild things on Mount Diablo and around Mount Diablo. Now, I'm proud to be one of the co-producers of this new documentary series. So check out Wild Mount Diablo on Facebook or YouTube. You can go on our website, MDIA, or even the state park now has links, which is wonderful. So, so how do we make opportunities available for people or organizations to get involved? To all of you as individuals, I'd say, come to the park. How long has it been since you visited? Or maybe you never have, even though this, amazing jewel is literally right in your backyard. Take a drive up to the Summit Visitor Center and Museum at the top of the mountain, or visit the Mitchell Canyon Visitor Center out in Clayton, or check out the MDIA website and choose a hiking tier like. Join an upcoming webinar. Drive up to the observatory and near the top of the mountain. Join one of the evening stargazings hosted by the Mount Diablo Observatory Association. An amazing thing to do. Again, take your kids. You will light a fire under them, I promise you. So, getting involved. I hope some of the opportunities I mentioned kind of resonate with you and you can help us spread the word. Reach out and get more information and provide pardon my shameless solicitation. Consider joining MDIA, $15 a year or more if you can, or make a one-time donation to help us educate folks about this truly amazing place. So last year, MDIA began a reorganization of our board committees. We started with increasing commitment to working directly with schools, recognizing that their curriculum and our goals were sure to intersect, and they do overlap. Our outreach efforts in the communities are also getting increased focus. So in closing, I wonder if there are ways that your team and MDIA might partner together as we embark on a truly exciting new project. And I won't steal Mike's thunder, but we intend to build a brand new visitor center for the state park in Mitchell Canyon. And this entrance to the park, again, near Clayton, it gets tens of thousands of visitors a year. And we do our best to serve them through what's basically a small trailer. And we'll see more about that. But at this point, I think we'll hold off on questions. And I'll hand it over to MDIA's Vice President, Mike Brandy, to tell you more about this great initiative.
Just a shout out to Wally. You can tell, by his enthusiasm and interest. He's an amazing board member and does just a fantastic job, on Mount Diablo. And also just a shout out to Lisa Annick. She's another one of our volunteers that does so much for us on behind the scenes, on maintaining our membership lists. And she's just a fantastic volunteer. So we have 13 members on our board and about 400 MDIA members in our membership list. So it's a pretty cool organization. Just to give you orientation again, this is Mount Diablo State Park, all this in green. As Wally mentioned, when it started, it was just this little tiny segment up here at the summit, a few hundred acres. And through lots of effort by folks, both in governmental and Save Mount Diablo, the park has now been able to expand to 22,000 acres. So just a remarkable achievement of the community to recognize the importance of this park and expand it into this huge park with, as Wally said, 162 miles of trails. So we're
Mike, I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you mean to be screen sharing at this point?
Oh, I'm sorry. I see it on mine.
I don't think we can see your share yet.
Yeah. You didn't miss much yet.
Details.
Yeah, thank you. So this is what I was saying. You can see this now, I hope. This is Mount Diablo State Park, and that's the 22,000 acres, the summit up here that Wally was talking about. That's where we started, very, very, small. And with the help of, like I say, the community and Save Mount Diablo, we've now expanded to 22,000 acres. I'm going to be focused on this entrance to the park. This is over the Mitchell Canyon entrance, and this is out of the city of Clayton. Here's Walnut Creek for some orientation. There's really just three major entrances to the park. One down here out of Alamo, that's called Southgate, coming up the paved road to the summit. The other one over here is out of Walnut Creek, coming up Northgate. That's the paved road up to the summit. Those are the only two ways to get up to the summit on a car or a road bike. But this area out here at Mitchell Canyon, this is the hikers jump off, to the mountain. When you're driving in from Clayton, this is your beautiful view of the Mitchell Canyon entrance. Just a little orientation. This is the summit up there, and you can see North Peak and over there. But this area right in here, this is Donner Canyon. And this road that we're driving in on, that's Mitchell Canyon. So as Wally said, we're a 501c3. We are dedicated exclusively to supporting Mount Diablo State Park. Each state park has kind of an organization like ours that helps volunteers and docents, and usually runs the stores there and the visitor centers. We're all volunteer, as Wally said, so our force of our 13 board members and some dedicated volunteers pull off all this that Wally mentioned in his presentation, which is absolutely amazing. Back in November in 2020, the board approved a goal to try to determine the feasibility of building a new visitor center at Mitchell Canyon. And that's what we'll be talking about today. Mitchell Canyon is a hugely popular area. It gets between 34,000, 35,000 people a year come into Mitchell Canyon. We get individual hikers, we get large groups, we get mountain bikers and running groups and Sierra clubs and hiking clubs. I was out there last weekend working as a docent. We had a hiking group of about 50 people coming in from Rio Vista. We've had them from Sacramento and Mountain View. So it's a really, really popular area. The Mitchell Canyon area draws people from all over the Bay Area. As part of our planning process for the new visitor center, we spent a couple of weekends out there doing visitor surveys. And I was amazed at where people were coming from. They're coming from San Jose, Half Moon Bay, Fremont, San Francisco, Napa, Sacramento, Modesto. It's just an attraction for the entire Bay Area, and very much of a regional park. It's also interesting to us every time we work out there how many first-time visitors we get to the park. Usually I think the impact of social media has expanded that, because people look up on an app, hey, where should I hike this weekend? And up pops, well, Mitchell Canyon, or go to the summit, or during the rains, Donner. So it's a challenge for us to be able to have the new visitors a great opportunity to educate them about the park and bring in their stewardship. And they come to do all these different hikes. It's a great jumping off place for hikes to the summit, to Eagle Peak, to the waterfalls. And just to mention, as it ties into your organization, obviously we've got two major watersheds coming down through here. One is Mitchell Creek, and Mitchell Creek goes up Mitchell Canyon. And that is one of the most popular places we lead hikes, because it is a riparian corridor. It's very, very rich, in bird life and butterfly life and insects. And it's where we do our tarantula hikes in the fall. It's wonderful for families because it's a fire road, so it's wide. And you can go about 2.5 miles out before it gets steep. So we have all kinds of folks going out there. It's just a tremendous educational opportunity there because of that watershed coming down. And the other real popular one is the waterfall, Donner Canyon. During the rains in the fall, it is extremely popular for people to hike up to the waterfalls. And it's one of the few areas around here that has a good view of nice waterfall. So it's we can count on it during the rains. We'll just have hiker after hiker coming up there ready to hit the waterfalls up at Donner Canyon. So here's our little visitor center now. It's been there for since 2004. It's a trailer. It's a 10-foot by 40-foot trailer. It's very small inside. It's stuffed with some fantastic exhibits that our docents have created. But if you get 3 or 4 people in there, it's pretty crowded. We've got exhibits, on the floor and on the walls, and it's not welcoming in my view in terms of as you're walking up there. It doesn't kind of invite you in. So it served a great purpose, but the trailer itself is getting old, and certainly we see the need for something much different out there. So what are we missing out there? Well, we're missing this larger indoor space for stationary and rotating exhibits. We have some amazing exhibits that rotate through, wildflowers. We've got a whole set of exhibits for early blooming wildflowers. Then we switched to late blooming wildflowers. And then, we've got the same thing with butterflies. When butterflies are out, we've got, wonderful posters. So we have to have a place to have a rotating exhibits, and we have to have a place that meets disability guidelines. Even though we've got a ramp that leads up to our little trailer, in the 6 years I worked there, I've never seen a person in a wheelchair because it's a gravel parking lot. So you can't get a wheelchair from your parking place, even though it's close there up to the exhibit. So we're missing a huge opportunity with that. We have a native plant garden behind there that's been established, I think it's about 15 years now, by volunteers. It's an incredible native plant garden. It's all Mount Diablo native plants that were thrown from Mount Diablo. They've got some great signs and exhibits there, and it's stuck behind the trailer. So I would say that probably 90% of the visitors have no idea that it's even there. And we see a great opportunity to bring that much more into the education that we do about Mount Diablo. And we need a large covered outdoor space because so many people come, they're gathering there, they're waiting for their other folks to arrive. And when the visitor center is closed during the week, we want to be able to still give important information about safety and what's blooming and where the hikes are. And then finally, we don't have any place for a multimedia room. And as you heard from Wally, we've got some tremendous audiovisual materials from the films that Wally's producing, and I recommend those. Check those out on Wild Mount Diablo. They're stunning. But also, the Audible Mount Diablo, and then our webinar series. We have so much material that we can show, kind of on a looping camera if we had the space to do it. So this our vision for what we're beginning to call the education center, as opposed to just the visitor center, because our main purpose, in life for MDIA is education. So MDIA hired an architectural firm of Ware and Associates. We entered into a contract. We paid $40,000 for them to prepare it. They're a well-known firm out of Oakland. They actually did the design for the Mount Visitor Center. If you haven't been up there in San Jose to see what they redid with that blue cube up there and made it into a visitor center, you should check it out. It's gorgeous. So after about 6 months study, then they came up with a plan that I'll show you here. So here's one of the renderings from the plan. This is it'd be located a little differently from where we are now. Same place in Mitchell Canyon, but the trailer would disappear and this would be located on the side. And it's located there because Ware Associates did a master planning for the entire site on how things should flow together. And also because this is a LEED building, they were really taking into consideration, where's the prevailing winds, where's the natural light coming in, all the things that you would expect, in a building. You can see from this image how welcoming it is with shaded areas for outdoor exhibits and lots of glass, to welcome visitors in. We went through about a 6-month planning process and tried to engage all kinds of stakeholders, from docents to equestrians to native plant garden people to visitors to the Ohlone Native Americans. We just had a really extensive outreach to different folks to try to get all the input. And from that, this design emerged. This building is about 1,500 square feet compared to our 400 square foot trailer. So it's a large, kind of, for reference, kind of larger than a classroom. And we wanted to do that and able to get a class in there. So here's another picture of the outdoor, large outdoor exhibit area with both exhibits. And back in this area, you'll see there's kind of a table there that we can do presentations. So a lot of times when we're leading like tarantula hikes, they'll bring out a live tarantula, and have them, people hold them and have them out there. Same thing with the snakes. So we've got one of our amazing volunteers, brings out his gopher snakes and his caged up rattlesnakes. And it's really, really popular, for the visitors and kids especially. And then from this area, you can kind of see a peek out here. This is to our native plant garden. And that's how we want to incorporate this right into the design of the educational center, not have it in the back wall of the educational center. So one of the things we're trying to focus on here is school children and field trips. If you're familiar, if you've driven up Mount Diablo, you know that it's a really difficult drive, and it's very difficult to bring a school bus up there. We just had a request the day before yesterday for a group. They wanted to bring some inner city kids up. They wanted to bring up a school bus and do an overnight camping. And the logistics of that were just really, really impossible. I think we've got a solution for them, but it's really difficult to get a school bus up there mixing with the cars and the bikes and the tight turns. Contrary, when you look over at Mitchell Canyon, we've got a straight shot, coming into Mitchell Canyon. It's flat. We already have enough space for a turnaround for a bus to come and park and wait for the kids and so forth. So we want to create something that is not just catering to visitors that are hiking. We want this to be an educational center for the kids to come. They're the future of our parks. They're the ones that we need to engage, in terms of how to protect and preserve these places. So this design that we've been working on would be able to house a field trip coming out with both the indoor space and the outdoor space, and very easy for buses and cars to come. And you can see this is another picture of this outdoor space and kind of what a bus could do and dropping kids off. And we really thought through how many kids we can have in there and how many outside. And it was really a key component of this plan. And this is a big focus for the state parks and for the state itself, is trying to get more people into the park, a more diverse attendance and younger kids, and I try to get and build up that the future stewards of these parks. So we're very excited about this. It's going to be very important for us to pull this off. And then again, in the back, we'll have this connection to the native plant garden. And some of you, this is near and dear to your own hearts, but we really see this as another big part of our education for visitors and field trips, is how do you plant, things in a drought, resistant drought area. And this is going to be the story of California as we're coming on. And also the building itself was designed, and this is what is called an urban wildfire interface zone. And the building was designed to say, how do you build in an area like this? What materials do you use? How do you make them not completely fire safe, but fire resistant? You can see on the top of these roofs, we have solar panels, another part of the education that we can create with this building. So that the building and the garden itself, are part of the education that we will be able to provide. So we're very excited about this. How you can help. So just before I get to that, we're now in the phase of trying to fund this. It's probably about a $2.5 million project. We've put in a state grant for trying to get some Prop 68 money for that last January. And we are supposed to hear, in September. But, as all of you experience in your own jobs, it's a really tough funding situation. There's only 23 million available statewide. There was $238 million requested. So it's really a scramble to try to find any kind of a grant. But we're committed to finding the money for this through grants and foundations and donations. And we have a meeting coming up just in a couple of weeks. So we're probably going to be able to launch our campaign to fundraise for this. So we're very excited. You can check out our website, mdia.org. Wally mentioned it several times, a ton of information on there, a fantastic website. And we also have a link to this project where you can see a little more detail about the project. You can donate to it. You can contact us, if you're interested in helping. But that's just the best way to find out more about it right now. So that's just a quick overview. We're very excited about what this can mean for the next 50 years for park visitation and for, educating through preservation. So we're really excited about it. So thanks so much for having us here. And also just thanks so much for all that you do. My gosh, listening to your introductions and what all of you do for this natural environment. My gosh, it's amazing. So really, thank you so much for all of that. It's been a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so much, Mike and Wally. I'm blown away by how much work you guys have done, especially considering that you're all volunteer. And I love the renderings of the new center. It's really inspiring, and I can't wait for it to happen. I think it'll be fantastic. It would be, I completely agree that there's tons of opportunities for the forum and also for the RCD to partner with you guys in different ways on many of the different programs that you mentioned. So I'd love, if you guys are okay with it, to open up the floor to any kind of questions that folks might have, or comments, discussion.
Sure.
Okay. Does anyone want to start us off? Yeah, Bob, please.
Yeah, to Wally and to Mike, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation and for what you're doing, what MDIA is doing. I've used your map, which I would describe as compared to another map that's far more comprehensive, as a very user-friendly map. You can be on the mountain, carry it with you, and not have to worry too much about how much wind there is when you use the map. I have a question for you, and Mike, you kind of altered the question a little bit, because until you mentioned Mitchell Canyon and Donner Canyon, I hadn't heard the word watershed from either of you.
Right.
And I think there are either 3 or 4 major watersheds that flow from and off of, or have part of their headwaters in Mount Diablo. And I was just wondering, when I looked at all the list of what you're doing, I didn't see any reference to watersheds in that. And I'm just curious, and I'm thinking more forward. I don't want to think too much about the past. I'd like to see how we can cooperate going forward, but making watersheds and riparian areas more of a, at least part of a focus of what you're doing. And maybe I just missed it in your presentation, but I would like to see some communication about that going forward.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I think that we are deficient in what the exhibits that we have over there now about watersheds. We've done a couple webinars that have touched on them. One was a geology webinar that went into the watersheds and where they're flowing, from the different points on the mountain and where they're winding up. And then we had another watershed presentation focusing on the Alameda area. But yeah, I'd love to be able to do a watershed webinar just on the mountain itself, and kind of where are those flowing to, and what can we do, and what do they mean, and so forth. So I'll follow up on that one, but I also think that we need to be able to incorporate some exhibits in the new visitor center. Right now, there's no space. I mean, it's just jammed.
Yeah.
But I think that would be an important element in any kind of a new expanded exhibit.
Mike,
Okay,
if I could add to your comments, and thank you, Bob, for bringing it up. I did mention in the beginning of my presentation that I've been working with Tim Jensen just recently so that I can use all of the overview watershed presentation document and everything that's in it, because
okay.
when we continue our efforts in creating new mini documentaries under the moniker of Wild Mount Diablo, the watershed becomes incredibly important, because I want to be able to tell the story about the river otters in our area. I want to tell the story of the western pond turtles. You can't do that without talking about the watershed. Yeah. And when I bring up the visual in the movie I'm working on right now, from your documents that Tim was good enough to share with me, and see all of the headwaters that come off of Mount Diablo, it's pretty impressive. And so yeah, we will at the very least be able to include information there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. I think that that's a really great point. And I think that we, between the expertise at flood control and the RCD and the forum, we could provide at the very least some kind of consultation or review if that would be helpful to you. But either way, I think that this could be a really good thing, because when we show people maps, they don't always think about the water, and there are plenty of kids that don't even know there's a creek in Walnut Creek, for example. So there's a lot to be said for adding more focus on that going forward. Igor.
Well, thank you. I would just like to take this opportunity to just reinforce Bob's point and what everybody else has been talking about. I think this is perhaps an opportunity that parts of our various movements can help each other by working together more. We're doing a lot on our own, and we're partnering with each other and with others more and more. And this just shows another way we can strengthen that. My family and I have been members of MDIA from a long time. We've been fans of Mount Diablo all the time. When we first got married, went up there. That was one of the first things we did. Is we went up to the top of Mount Diablo. And I've camped up there. I've brought in the new year up there. It's just a wonderful thing to have. People from out of state, when I come and take them there, there's also full of, oh, well, California's not this and that and the other. We got this better in New York or whatever. But to get to the top of Mount Diablo, they uniformly say, we don't have anything like this. And so they really kind of brings it home to learn to appreciate it. I was really been impressed over the years with the quality of the publications and the maps and the beautiful photographs of whatever the subject matter happens to be it wildflowers or birds or whatever. I'm just amazed that a volunteer group, a grassroots volunteer group like yourselves, has developed the capability to produce something of such high quality and so professional. And I was wondering, can you tell us a little bit about how that happened? How did you develop this great capability to put out all these materials? And now, of course, you're moving into the websites in another big way. But it's quite an audacious thing for a all volunteer group like yourselves to take on and to set such a high standard. So I was wondering if you might be able to tell us how that happened.
Yeah, I can tackle the first part of it, Wally, then why don't you chime in? Just to give you one example right now that is very current is that we're developing a publication on the native bees of Mount Diablo. We don't have anything like that right now. And it started because of a board member's passion who graduated a long time ago in entomology and spent his entire career outside of entomology. But when he retired a couple years ago, he decided to jump back in, and native bees was one of the things he was interested in. So he has spent many hours on the mountain photographing and documenting the bees. And then in a publication like that, we reach out to consultants that volunteer their time that are even have more expertise. So he's got connections, for example, up to UC Davis, and had them review some of the technical material to make sure it's accurate. And so that's probably been about a year-long project, and we'll be getting ready to publish that in about a month. So that's kind of an example of what happens. The same kind of thing happens with wildflowers and with birds and butterflies. It's a volunteer-led effort, and then bringing in some expertise, to double check it before it goes to print. And Wally?
I would only kind of multiply what you said about people's passion. I think MDIA has done an excellent job of finding board members that have passion, and we allow people to run with their passion and embrace that. And we're careful about who we invite in as well, to make sure that they're going to be that kind of person, that there is a fire in them for all things natural, and then give them rope, give them the freedom to go and get it done, and we do it as a team. It's a very tight group of folks who want to help each other in wherever their passion's leading them.
Thank you both. Fareed.
Thanks. I guess first, I'm a little ashamed to admit that I didn't realize so much information was available on the website. So this was really great to listen. Now I've made a few notes to go check out further. I also recently put on my to-do list to go and try to find and see the headwaters of at least of the Walnut Creek watershed and the Mount Diablo Creek watershed. And so kind of building on what Bob was saying, one note I made while you were presenting is, is it possible to add some signage to identify those locations? That might be kind of cool for hikers to stumble across.
Yeah, good idea.
And one other question for the new visitor center that you're planning, did the designer incorporate any kind of green infrastructure elements?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Yeah, certainly the architect is a LEED certified architect. So the building orientation in terms of prevailing winds and natural light and so forth was all done with that in mind. We actually used a sub-consultant on the project called Beyond Efficiency, who specialize in building orientation and natural cooling systems and minimal indoor lighting, et cetera, et cetera. So we paid a lot of attention to that early on. We also brought on a landscape consultant so that there's going to be minimal landscaping around there, but there will be some. So we have the berms for watershed, percolation, and some areas that will probably do some native plant in the outside of that visitor center, like we have now. We've got some native things right in front of the visitor center with signage on them. So we'll be taking both, the planting as well as the building itself. It will be a very part of the education of what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Yeah, very cool. Thanks.
Yeah, it's really cool. They do amazing work.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be able to take advantage of that opportunity for an additional, teaching moment when folks are at the new center. John.
Fabulous presentation. I'm just so impressed by it. Actually, I remember wanted to just speak to a couple of things that came to mind when I was listening to the show. First is that I hope that in going forward, you'll acknowledge, or as part of the Interpretive Association's work, is, really making sure that Mount Diablo, as the northernmost mountain of the Diablo Range, is there. That is what it is about. I mention that also because obviously the geology of that mountain is so complex, like everything else in the mountain, but also because I think showcasing, or rather getting partnerships with other organizations, which I haven't heard about, which I imagine you already have, but you could expand upon them perhaps, I'm sure. Because the Nature Conservancy, for example, has been leading a long time, 20-year effort to acquire properties along the Diablo Range, going south from there, right, in the Alameda County, and going further south from there. So partnering with them for support purposes would be great. I think in terms of, this is for support of building the Interpretive Association's new Mitchell Canyon office would be great. Also support partnership with the Contra Costa Water District. I was involved in developing their resource management, recreation management plan 30 years ago. And seeing that, partnering with them for supporting your effort here would be great, because they're on the far eastern side of the Diablo Range, there in Los Vaqueros. Same with the California Native Plant Society. I think of Mary Bowers, who wrote the first treatise of plants of Mount Diablo back in the 50s or so. And so that they would see a legacy there to be involved with your efforts. The California Native Plant Society, with respect to her, founder of the Mount Diablo. Mount Diablo, of course, they're natural to be a partner in what you're doing here. And then I would say watershed awareness groups, going back to the idea of watersheds. Holy H2O is a Bay Area watershed awareness group that leads all manner of different kinds of interpretations and so forth as well. So I would involve them. And then specifically, you have all these communities around the edge, call them the apron, or actually they're the alluvial fan of Mount Diablo, city of Walnut Creek, town of Clayton, city of Danville. I'm sure they would love to be associated with this effort insofar as showcasing the mountain. And as after all, it's on their city symbols in many of their cases. And so as to make this a deeper part of their identity, what you're doing is so important to showcase it. And then, speaking of showcasing, I would encourage you to have an article in the Bay Nature magazine about this effort. I mean, after all, I know they did one many years ago. They did an article on the mountain, but now on this current effort, I think you really would do well to have something you can do as a portfolio. Pull it out of the magazine and show it to people. So I just mention these things as ways to help you, get more support at a wider level for what you're doing.
Great ideas. I wrote them all down. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome to reach out to me later if you like to discuss it.
Thank you,
Thanks.
John.
Bet.
Thanks, John. Those are great ideas. Did anyone else have? Yeah, Lisa, please.
Yeah, so I mean, since I have been sort of involved with MDIA for a long time, I know that there's a lot of overlap with people who volunteer with Save Mount Diablo. But just interested in, because I actually haven't heard yet, more specifically, I'm assuming that this is more MDIA's initiative because of that unique relationship with,
right.
But
So
just if you could say a little about that, that would be great.
Sure, yeah, it's a good question. So Save Mount Diablo is just an amazing organization. As I mentioned, they're largely responsible for the expansion of the mountain over these last 50 years. And so we've been in touch with them, with Ted Clement, and with some of their fundraisers. They've actually given us some advice on how to launch this. So their role is really on conservation, and going to the earlier point, they're really trying to focus their role now on the Diablo Range. They're kind of shifting a little bit to say we can't just be focused on Mount Diablo, but we want to be focused on the Diablo Range. And so they're really into conservation, of the land. And we are into bricks and mortar. We're the ones that are, building the visitor center, bricks and mortar type of a project, and not conservation. We don't have we don't overlap in that regard. Our charter does not allow us to buy land and do that kind of thing. And Save Mount Diablo's charter is just the opposite. They're conservation. So we're in very close contact with them. We coordinate even on some of our webinars and stuff that we do with them. But they're a fantastic organization.
All right, it looks like, Dawn, did you have something else or was your hand still up from before? Before, okay. All right, and then Lisa, I would appreciate it if you could tell us a little bit more about what you've been doing with, or what you've done over the years with MDIA, because that'll help at least some of us RCD folks kind of contextualize how you've been involved over the years.
So I, golly, it's very interrelated with my work with the RCD, but there was a Mount Diablo Creek planning group. RCD had a grant for a watershed planning effort, and I was not working for the RCD at that time, but thought it would be really great to have a Friends of Mount Diablo Creek as a stakeholder participating in that watershed planning. So that's how I started focusing on Mount Diablo Creek a lot. And of course, that led to me deciding to volunteer. I actually called both Save Mount Diablo. Actually, I called Save Mount Diablo and they were too busy to answer my call. And somebody else said, Lisa, they need board members on MDIA. So I was on. And I actually am glad it happened that way, because I find them there definitely are a lot of people in both organizations, but I think MDIA is really a top-notch group of volunteers. So I was on the board for a few years. I was the board member in charge of membership. They let me keep doing the membership as a volunteer, but I'm not on the board. And that's where we are right now. And actually hearing this, I would like to do even more with MDIA, so I'm a real MDIA booster.
So
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you for asking, Lisa.
No, it's helpful to know, and just, because yeah, you've worked in these watersheds for quite some time, so it's helpful to know. One other thing that I was going to mention, and unfortunately Kathy Cutting isn't here with us today, but she is the field station coordinator for the CSU East Bay Concord campus. And, that's actually where the state park had their 100-year celebration. We actually tabled at that event, and it was a great event. I think hundreds of people were there, I think, throughout the day. And it just reminded me to kind of let you know that, that's another possible partner in terms of working on some of this work. They are currently working with Native peoples and with us to build a new garden and farm that will be on the campus and will be right in the shadow of Tushchak. So, it's another possible partnership opportunity. So, yeah. All right. Well, did anyone else have any questions or comments for Mike and Wally? Sounds like we had some really great questions. Thank you all. Well, thank you again, Mike and Wally. I think.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate it.
It's really exciting, and I'm sure we'll want an update and potentially even like a tour or something later on when you've got places to show us, because that just sounds awesome.
Yeah, we'll be in touch.